everybody. Welcome to Solidarity Live. This is Jocelyn, and I'm here with Alex and Kymone. It has been an insane week in Washington, where all of us are coming to you from, as protests in honor of George Floyd have totally overtaken the city in a really beautiful way. In the meantime, Kymone and I were right in front of the White House when the militarized police force started shooting tear gas at us. So it's been an interesting week, to say the least. Alex, Kymone, how are you guys doing?
You know, it's a weird time.
Remaining awake on a great revolution.
Kymone is just, I mean, I knew this already, but Kymone is just a hero. And I really want to say that out the gate because I was scared, y'all. You have no idea. Like, you have these like men with guns marching out line by line slowly. You know they're gonna start shooting at you. And Kymone was just like, yeah, hey guys, what's up? Were you scared at all? I was terrified.
Unfortunately, part of the Black experience, particularly a Black male experience in America, you had guns in your face by police before. And of course, we also had our 2 tours of duty in Ferguson, so I know what tear gas smelled like. So yeah, it was not my first rodeo, and I realized how many people was actually fearful of their lives, and I understand that, and it wasn't lost on me. And I got hit with a tear gas canister projectile in the leg. I still got a bruise and not the source of the touch in my lower leg, but the fact that we was there and we got it on tape, and we was the first media outlet to call the shot that Bill Barr ordered it. Initially they denied it, but then they came out and embraced it once they saw the footage. It reminds me that we are in the right place at the right time, and we are standing right here in this moment of history.
I will add one thing on that because it's just hilarious, which is that they might have embraced it, but then they cleaned it up because everyone is like, you gassed a priest for a photo op. That's bad. So then Barr today announced that, yes, indeed, they did gas a priest along with hundreds of peaceful protesters, including you two, for a photo op. Oh, I'm sorry. They did gas everybody, but it wasn't related to the photo op. That's their line now. They just gassed everybody, and it just so happened to coincide with Donald walking across the square. And I'm just like,
right.
It's amazing. But his people, I'm sure, are going to eat it up and be like, yeah, it makes sense. He was inspecting the bunker. He wasn't scared. He wasn't hiding before. He was inspecting the bunker, and tear gassing the people had nothing to do with his fascistic photo op.
I want to remind everyone that Hitler went to the bunker when everything was over. It was the end of the war, and I think we're getting close to the end of this Trump regime. But that's a caveat, because I do think that there's going to be problems with the election in November.
Well, and I think that for me, there was no doubt about the extent to which this administration is willing to go to put down basic civil liberties and basic peaceful protests. But to see it, so you have Kymone and Will, who were right by what do you even call it? Like, it literally is the police barricade. Mm-hmm. We're right there from the beginning. And then, you see Bill Barr come out, take a look at the protesters, and give some kind of order. And 10 to 15 minutes later, they start shooting at us. I have never, to see it in real time, to see this administration actually make that decision in front of our faces, it was a life-changing experience for me. It's terrifying.
What did it feel like? What do you think because you were radical before, Jocelyn. So what changed? Describe it a bit.
So it's really an emotional thing to really watch them take a look at all these protesters who are incredibly young. If I said this once, I said this 100 times on our stream, almost everybody out there was under the age of 25. Kymone kept finding these really passionate, like 19-year-olds, you know, like a lot of them were Black, a lot of them weren't, but these were student age kids. To look into a crowd of kids and say, yeah, shoot at them. Like that is, it's still I'm still wrapping my mind around it.
And I have to admit, and Jocelyn can attest to this, that I would say, okay, the curfew is at 7. I have to go when it's curfew because I don't want it to break any laws, get arrested, and not knowing, you know, where I'm being released, whatever. And then they attack us well before the curfew.
Yes.
So they changing the rules of engagement as they go along, and I get brutalized and assaulted. So the next day I was like, "Fuck your curfew." so now it's on. You know, I was trying to be a good guy. So now after then it was like whatever. So that's what changed with me is that realizing that, you know, we have to stop following their rules. This is civil disobedience, and we, you know, they are the people on the wrong side of history, and we are the good guys. They are the bad guys, and we have to have rules and engagement based upon that paradigm.
And there was a really powerful moment where Kymone was, so how old was that young man? He was like, but he looked young. There was a young man that was shouting at the other protesters, like, don't shake the fence or they'll start shooting. And Kymone goes up to him and Kymone's like, hey, they're going to shoot at us anyway. Like, don't play into their hands of thinking there's a way we can protest that they'll allow. Colin Kaepernick, like, took a knee. And that's not okay. You know what I mean? Like, there isn't a way that we can do this that is acceptable to a fascist administration.
There's no acceptable, respectable politics with this. There's nothing we can do to appease white supremacy. I mean, they won't even pass an anti-lynching bill. I mean, that's just how strong white supremacy is still in America, that they can't even say the words anti-lynching. Yeah, you know, the fact that with all this going on, still here in 2020, they can't even do that is proof positive that there's no negotiations with these people. They have to be confronted. Like, did y'all know about the story in Bethesda, on the Bethesda bike trail, of this little girl, a little white girl was putting up anti-racist posters on a bike trail and was attacked by a grown man, and the police are looking for him now. The footage is just so disturbing. I've had to put it on React's Facebook page, but that's just to give you an idea of how white supremacy is dangerous to everyone.
Yeah, and it's like, I think this really, one thing that I've always, you know, we talk about on this show a lot is like, yes, white privilege is obviously very real and dangerous, but the police state will come after all of us. And if you want proof, you look at our footage. Look at our footage when they start shooting at Will and Kymone. Like, we have it on camera. It's not subtle. It happened in front of the eyes of the mainstream media. Like, they're going to come at all of us. A state which murders Black and brown people in broad daylight will murder white people just as happily. Just because it happens less frequently doesn't mean like we're safe. And I think people need to really wake up to the fact that we are all in this together.
Did you guys see Barack Obama's speech addressing this week?
I saw parts of it. I don't get the vibe that you were super pleased.
Nah, you didn't miss anything. He was supportive of the protesters, and he was very careful not to call them thugs this time, he did in the Baltimore uprising, primarily because it was such a diverse group. But he did make a point to point out the few bad apples that committed acts of violence, but he never once acknowledged the reason why all 50 states are protesting. He never addressed police violence. He never addressed the issue at hand that is the reason and the cause for everyone protesting. Now, he doesn't admit it. He doesn't acknowledge it. He just talks about the protesters. But my favorite president, President Jimmy Carter, he came out in a statement and he said, people of power, privilege, and moral conscience must stand up and say no more to a racially discriminatory police and justice system, immoral economic disparities between whites and blacks, and government actions that undermine our unified democracy. Those are fighting words. And I wish that came out of the first black president of the United States, but he's continuously disappoints us.
Well, and you pointed this out multiple times, Kymone. Obama didn't live far from where we were. He could have come down.
Uh-oh.
Kymone, I think you're muted.
Kymone is muted. Kymone. We're working on it. So as Kymone remembers what he said, you have to say it again. Come on.
Obama.
You should be on. Come on.
Did y'all catch all that?
No.
Wow. You didn't catch the Jimmy Carter?
No, we
caught
got
Jimmy Carter.
And then
okay, I don't know what happened.
Obama lives nearby and he could come down, and that's when you went muted.
The system hit me when I started talking about Obama. All that, right? And I said, what if Obama stood between the protesters and the violent police? He came down with his own security detail and stood with us. That would be powerful. And then he finally makes a statement 2 days later, and the statement is just as empty as his presidency.
Now, I know that's not shared everywhere, that sentiment. Come on, you want to speak to the controversy?
It's very unpopular with black people, because black people look at Obama because he was the first black president and he was attacked by racists. Of course he was attacked by racists, but that should not provide cover to the disappointments of his administration, and also the evils that his administration did do. I mean, they did overthrow governments. They did say criminal banks were too big to jail. They did ignore systemic racism in the police department. The one time that Barack Obama criticized the police was when his friend Skip was arrested, and then he even apologized for that and brought the guy to the White House and bought him a beer. So, but a lot of black people are emotional in defending Barack Obama, because back in the day, when I was a kid, every black household had a picture of JFK, Martin Luther King, and Jesus. That was in every black person's household. That was my grandparents' generation. Everyone had that picture up. Now it's just Obama and Jesus, and so they're synonymous in their minds. And unfortunately, I'm popular in acknowledging the truth, but that's what we're here to do.
So I had a thought in just looking at this that seems to be apt to me, that what we're seeing and why we need to really, every message has to be focused on the actual problem, which is that the police murder black and brown people, primarily men, but not only men, men and boys, with impunity, with no punishment. And then the apparatus wraps around them and protects them. And so I was, just chatting on social media about how what they need to reckon with is the same thing. It's similar to what the Catholic Church had to reckon with predator priests, with pedophile priests. The system protected pedophiles, which then recruited pedophiles, because they see that the system will protect them being predators within this system. So that's where they go. So if you want to be a racist murderer, the place to go is to be a cop right now. So yeah, there are going to be some good apples there, but as long as the orchard is set up around protecting racist murdering cops, then that's what you're going to select for. That's who's going to come and show up. And all the good apples in the world don't mean anything if it's watered with the blood of innocent people murdered. So the system needs to be uprooted totally with that laser-like focus on what we're dealing with, protecting the American people from killer cops.
That's a great analogy, and I will use it often.
There was my friend. So for people who don't live in DC, this is like, I cannot overstate how serious this is. So I live right by the White House, and there are cops and National Guardsmen and special service everywhere. Like, we had Secret Service cars parked outside of our apartment building. Why? Like, it's everywhere. You walk around DC right now, there are low flying helicopters everywhere. And I have friends who are on things like Tinder and Bumble, and they've been connecting with National Guardsmen, and they ask them, like, are you excited about what you're doing here? And they say yes. They're excited to come shoot at protesters and shoot at Black activists. Like, this is not like, oh, we're just following orders, we don't know what's happening. Like, I have female friends getting messages from guys like, yeah, excited to be down here and rough up some spoiled children. Like, these people know what they're doing. Blue lives don't matter because blue lives is not a thing. You can quit being a cop anytime you want. And they're not going to, though, because like you guys are saying, you sign up for this position if this is the type of thing that appeals to you.
Well, we just had a Huffington Post just reported that some activists out of Oakland, California, had a shipment of masks going out nationwide to support the protesters so they can protect themselves and still within the midst of this pandemic. And they had Black Lives Matter. I think actually it said stop killing Black people in the mask. And that shipment was interrupted and seized by the federal government.
Yeah, that was the movement for Black Lives. And the scariness of that story, but I mean, like, it's scary. It is scary, right? The tyrannical government with just almost unlimited power is obviously scary, but surprising it's not to me. I mean, again, we talked about this last time, Kymone, you know, Bobby Kennedy signed J. Edgar Hoover's warrant to wiretap Martin Luther King Jr., and then to blackmail him, attempt to blackmail him into killing himself. Now, the last part of it wasn't spelled out, but Bobby Kennedy signed those warrants for there was no criminality going on. It was just to spy on MLK. But this shipment was intercepted by the feds, and no one is, I want to also speak to something Jocelyn said, no one's clear who's doing what now. Right? I mean, like, what agency, how do they know that these masks, which are going to protect not only the protesters, but every nurse, every doctor, and every person in the city, because that's how a pandemic works. You got to protect everybody. But they seized cloth masks. And I don't know if they've held them or if they are destroyed. You know, we don't know where the seized masks and ventilators from before. Maybe they're just sending them to the Republican cronies. But the point is, they knew where these masks were coming from. They knew where they were going, and they seized them with impunity. The federal government did that. They were listening. The DEA has been activated and allowed to, I mean, salivating at this opportunity for them to flex on the American people. It's their favorite thing. The Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, I mean, these are the brown shirts of our time. They're just in green now. Unlimited budget signed off by each Congress for, I mean, just like unlimited, the amount of money that we're giving to Customs and Border for ICE and this internal federal police force. And now they're bringing a whole bunch of people into DC who don't even have insignia on their arms. They're wearing irregular uniforms, non-regular face masks, no identification. They have the weight of the state behind them. That is not okay, because what that is a paramilitary police force that is only answerable to the current administration, i.e. fascism. This is what we're dealing with right now. And I feel like, Jocelyn, if I could ask you again, that feeling, that change that you had, if you could kind of spell out a little bit more of what you saw and felt and the crucible that, you went through, and what you think it was witness. What did you witness?
Now I'm muted. at the end of the day, like Kymone's right. Like the reason, this probably was more effective for me is because I am white. Like it's not like I was a big fan of the cops before this, but it is still a very different emotion to have them. And this was like, so I live right by the White House. I've been attending, not as a journalist, but just like going in and out of the protests all week because this is right by my house. So I've just been like wandering down to see what's up. There was a day on Sunday night where the police started shooting at and tear gassing us. And like everyone, I ran away. And a young guy, he was probably like 20, maybe at the oldest. His arm was just like blood. Like I will never forget. So like I bandaged him up in my lobby. He's clearly like disoriented, right? But like this is a kid. You know what I mean? Like maybe not legally, maybe he's like 20 years old, but you look at this kid, he's so young. And it's just like, it is one thing to know those things intellectually. It's another thing to watch it happen indiscriminately in front of the eyes of the media and realize they really do not give a fuck. They will absolutely like rough up and murder Black and brown people and anyone else who happens to be around. They don't care. And it's just like,
especially those bearing witness. So Kymone,
yeah.
I know you have to leave soon. So if you could sort of tie together the work that We Act Radio has done, as our station that you manage and run. Like we were there in Ferguson. We had cameras on the ground. That was like one of the first times that had ever happened. We were there. It's similar. And I think it's the same fascistic forces as we talk about. We were in Standing Rock. We saw what they did in Standing Rock. We were live streaming from the middle of the protest there, and now we're here, and there's this threat of state violence that's accelerating, and that's what it looks like to me. But can you tell me about the impunity? They used to pretend they weren't targeting journalists, right? They used to be like, oops, we accidentally shot another journalist. But now you're seeing it all over the news. They're absolutely not hiding it anymore. The message is clear. If you bear witness, you are a target.
Well, Trump did declare the media the enemy. And I do want to point out that when you say Standing Rock, or you talk about Ferguson, or you talk about even Occupy Wall Street, Barack Obama was the president then. Mm-hmm. So I don't want people thinking that just because we change presidents, that's going to change the system. Obviously, that is proof that it will not. All right. And that is why I won't let up on that issue. But I want to say some good things, like the mayor and Chairman Phil Millicent has convinced to me that DC is, in fact, a sanctuary city when it comes to this type of brutality. Phil Millicent spoke out and he denounced the attacks on Monday. He said it's creating a dangerous situation, and he gave full support for all of the protests. He said that it was born out of police violence and it should not be addressed by police violence. And the mayor has gone to the extraordinary step of basically painting the White House back by putting Black Lives Matter 3 blocks long on the doorstep of the White House. And I can't wait to go see it in real life. But it to summarize everything that you're saying, I have to go back to something Martin Luther King said, and he said in his letter in Birmingham jail, he says, direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has consistently been refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. And that's where we are. We're here forcing them to confront the issue. That's why you can't even get the anti-lynching bill passed without controversy. And and this is just a prelude. It's going to be a long, hot summer because the next big thing is going to be the council rent movement. Because if they try to use the police to go and evict 40% of a city, it's going to get very ugly very quickly. And for those who want to do something, participate, not able to make it out to these events and direct confrontations as direct action, I should say, they can support where they are. We have been sponsoring a campaign for Drums for Justice. Every day at 7 o'clock, wherever you are, live stream your musical protest song for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and support all of the protesters, just like the New York residents did such a beautiful job thanking the healthcare heroes every day by applauding them. I think that would bring us together and create this community that we want to talk about more. But it's important that you said the work that we at Gray and other independent media outlets have done is to change the narrative. What would have happened if we hadn't been there Monday to document that? If we didn't tie Bill Barr orders to those attacks, if we didn't catch all that on tape, because we was there. Had we not been there, it could have been omitted, because as Ida B. Wells, the anti-lynching activist from the 20th century, says that those that commit the murders write the reports. And so one of the glaring issues I've seen is when the SUVs of NYPD was driven into crowds of people. The mayor defended that and categorized it as the police practicing restraint because no one was killed or seriously injured. The New York Times headline says something to the effect of protesters take on NYPD. NYPD attacked protesters with a vehicle. And the headline says protesters take on NYPD. We are here to change the narrative. And as you say so brilliantly, so often, it won't be a revolution until there's a revolution in media. There has to be a media revolution to change the narrative. And I think with the fact that we've got millions of views this week from our live streams, and I like to point out proudly, and I'm gonna take this to my grave, that Barack Obama's empty speech got 1.5 million views. We Act Radio's live streams got 1.75 million views. If We Act Radio is getting more eyeballs than the former president and the most popular president alive today, then this is, sir, I submit to you, a media revolution.
Thanks so much. Awesome.
See you next time.
I'll see you tomorrow.
It's a party tomorrow.
Yes, it's a party tomorrow. Bye.
Goodbye.
So Jocelyn, what else?
Kymone.
What else do you think? So I'll talk about a couple things, but just generally, the protests are winning against Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's somewhat hard for people to see that sometimes, but the narrative right now is definitely in New York Times. You know, they do that. They printed a full fascist opinion piece from Mr. Cotton from Arkansas, just full fascism on the page of the New York Times.
The troops.
So I'm just gonna put that and be like, yeah, I guess they do what they do. But you know, when you have MSNBC reporters and local reporters, and then an Australian broadcaster assaulted by the police with no provocation, you're starting to see headlines that are reading police riot across the country. Dangerous thugs in uniform assault peaceful demonstrators. And that is incredibly powerful. As powerful as bearing witness is you also were participating in standing up to power. And that is a really dangerous and important act. So I want you to just like keep I don't know, looking at it, seeing if you can describe what you felt then.
You guys, like
or the other nights, or the multiple other nights.
So this has been the craziest week of my life. And so for those of you who don't know me, haven't had the pleasure, I've been doing this work for years. So this isn't like the first time I've been annoyed at police officers, and nor is it the first time I've covered like a really intense protest where a lot of people are getting arrested. But, and I cannot say this enough, like, it is an incredible life-changing experience to watch a bunch of students and kids and young people and people who are clearly not armed get like just totally brutalized, and then the next day come back in even higher numbers. Like, I will never feel pessimistic about anything again, because, you know, one of the moments I wanted to talk about, Alex, so Monday was the day that we got like really fucked up, you know. Kymone got shot in the leg. I have another friend that is just like totally messed up from that day. They were just pelting us with tear gas and rubber bullets.
Our colleague and journalist Linda Tirado was blinded. She lost her eye from the cop, from the thugs in blue who shot her in the face, and she lost her eye.
And that's a tactic they use against people with cameras. Like, it's intentional. It's disgusting. Doesn't even begin to cover. It's a war crime. But so the next day, Tuesday, we're back at the White House, the same place. I was wearing my swimming goggles because I did not want to get tear gas again. I did not enjoy it. And I think like one of the more powerful moments of my life was watching.
Just to be truthful, but I don't want to. But it was not tear gas. Remember, they promised that it was gas that made you tear. So it wasn't actually a war crime because it wasn't CX or CN tear gas. It was actually just a separate manufacturer who made gas that makes you tear. So I just want to be because Donald Trump, his White House has been demanding retractions from media about the use of tear gas because, you know, when the Catholic News Service wrote that, and the Episcopal News Service, wrote that headline that was like, they gassed our priest. They decided to try to clean it up, but that is what they came up with. It's not tear gas, it's gas that makes you tear.
I don't really care what you call it. I have a video on my phone, and this is one of the, so like, you know, obviously we were tear gas pretty aggressively, and then you move back. I have a video on my phone where I'm like trying to explain what's going on. At this point, I'm like a block back, and I can't even talk because I'm coughing, and I'm just like, from a block away, like, this is some serious military grade shit. They're shooting at 18-year-olds with signs. Like, people were
in the middle of a respiratory based pandemic.
Yeah. But point being, it was incredibly empowering to see the next day, exactly at curfew, people were absolutely prepared to get shot at. And, you know, I like have my little mic and I'm like trying to figure out what's going on. I'm like, so guys, are we like leaving now? And they're like, no, we're going to stay here. Like, they'll have to push right through. We're going to link arms and we're not moving. I was like, oh, it was just really empowering to see that level of bravery. Because I personally was fine with running away from the guys with the guns, but the protesters were like, no, they are going to have to push us out of here by force. And guess what? They didn't, because the protest worked. People saw all these people get brutalized on the news, and instead of staying away, they came out in even more massive numbers. It was incredibly hopeful to see. And it was really, because they ended up not tear gassing us at that specific moment, but everybody there was absolutely prepared for it and willing to not run. And that was beautiful to see.
On the not beautiful side again, I want to spend just a minute on, so like, there's this thing that happens, and I understand the impulse because, again, not all cops, but again, if the orchard is built around to protect the murder tree, then it will be the murder tree orchard, right? Like, I don't care what else you plant in there. But every time there is the murder tree, and, you know, we saw this, it literally, Ferguson, we saw this, Baltimore, we left out Baltimore. We were live streaming Baltimore. Cops murdered a man. And so what happens is you start getting these stories that leak out through social media and then some local news, and it's like a cop playing basketball with kids, you know, and it's like, like the kneeling in solidarity. That's what they're doing. And now, they're taking a knee. These police officers are taking a knee, and they get all this press, like, see, not all cops. There was, did you see the horrible video from Buffalo, New York, where these cops just slam a 75-year-old man to the ground, smashes his head into the ground, and he's bleeding out of his ear. 75 years old, and cops in riot gear slam him with a riot shield. It was the same cop who the day before was part of the PR effort. And it's just like, the reason that the protests are working is because the cops are out of control and there's no hiding it anymore. These are protests against police brutality, and the police response is to brutalize a 75-year-old man.
Yeah, and there is no accountability, there is no self-awareness, there is no contrition, there is no introspection on why these protests exist in the beginning. Like, the interactions I've had with police over the past week alone are just fascinating. The difference between when I have my camera gear and when I'm just like walking home and they're like, "Evening, ma'am." I'm like, it's weird. It's weird. They do not view themselves as the bad guys, which is why this effort to defund the police, to create a new method of community safety, is so essential, because the institution is rotten to its core.
So let's talk about that. A few things. Qualified immunity. Why would you have qualified immunity? So again, when the system protects killer cops, the system recruits killer cops. If you can literally murder someone with impunity or hurt them, and like, if I went outside and recklessly hurt someone, I would be criminally liable and civilly liable, right? And that means I can go to jail or prison, and I can get sued for damages because it was my fault that I caused a harm. Police officers are immune to civil liability. It is. We don't need to go through the whole thing, but it is the most perverse thing. Libertarians, Republicans, the Koch brothers, all the way over to me and you on the left, the host of Solidarity Live, agree. Qualified immunity has got to go, because police do not feel that they will ever be held accountable for their actions.
And it's so interesting to me that this is controversial. Think about any other profession, right? Like, what we do. If we screw up, we could get sued. My mom's a physician. If she has a patient die on her, even if it's not her fault, she will have lawyers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, every other profession, people are held very accountable for their behavior, as it should be, perhaps overly accountable sometimes. And yet the police are allowed to literally murder people on camera and then go back home to their families.
The idea that it makes any sort of sense. So the state, we create the state empowers certain people to have rights above our liberty and our lives, to not hold those agents of the state to the highest, the absolute pinnacle of responsibility, makes no sense at all. If we're going to allow agents of the state to hold the power of life and death over we, the people, then those agents of the state have to be able to be held accountable. Qualified immunity is an abomination. The lack of community review in policing makes absolutely no sense. What Kymone always talks about is community hiring and firing of police officers. So there has to be a community review and accountability board that has the power to hire and fire, and is not just window dressing.
Well, I'm like, I really am hesitant to say what I'm about to say, because,
Oh, it's the good stuff then.
Comparisons to Hitler are like weak, but I will say,
Except in times of rampant fascism.
Yeah, So I did a Holocaust tour of Eastern Europe on my own last year. Do not recommend that. Go with someone, okay? And the thing that shocked me about going to places like Poland and Auschwitz and, Schindler's Factory and all these things was not the brutality, because we've seen the movies, we've read the books. You're prepared, you're mentally prepared for that. What shocked me about seeing Auschwitz and these other places was the normalcy. You get that people living in occupied Poland and in the concentration camps even learn to view this as normal, learn to view the fact that one wrong move could get you killed as normal. That is what living under occupation means. And I think when we talk about fascism historically, again, we're reading these novels, we're reading these history books, which understandably focus on the most cinematic moments, right? They focus on the things that are going to fire the cortisol off in your brain. But what's most shocking to me about this week and the things I saw while I was there is that, like, if you're not careful, this regular brutality, this regular lack of freedom, this regular murder just becomes your normal life. And you don't think about it anymore. And you learn to live around it. And that is what we absolutely cannot have in the United States of America, allegedly a democracy. If a president can call on the military to use violence against nonviolent protesters, we do not live in a democracy. End of story.
Did you see that picture of all of the army lined up at the Lincoln Memorial?
Yeah.
I mean, like, if that doesn't just speak to people, and the good news is it is, in my read of public opinion polling and the news, Monsieur Cotton is alone in his like, yeah, we're going fascism. Senator Cotton is just a giant ass. He is like literally the most worthless person. And the Democratic Party of Arkansas couldn't even find somebody to run against him. So I don't know what that says about them, but like, this guy is just useless. Besides him, because he looked at that and was like, yes, this is what I want. This is what I want. I want police. I want the military shooting protesters. I mean, so take a little side note that dude sucks. And then the rest of the country looks at this and is like, this is not right. And I want to get at, I love your description of the banality of evil, right? The phrase and concept coined to talk about what happens, that in the face of evil acts and just systems of evil, what normalcy it just continues. Mm-hmm. Life continues. And so people find ways to just be like, that barbarism, I guess, is that's just the way it is now. That is what we have to fight against. And I do think that one of the armors that we have, and it's funny because a lot of people have known for a long time that the narrative of the United States of America is not honest about the United States of America, but the myth of who we are as a country, this noble democracy, like it just can't stand next to, non-insignia paramilitary machine gun wielding, gassing priests, just hammering with the batons, pushing a 75-year-old man over. All of those they don't compute with a lot of people in this country. A lot of people who probably should have known that a lot of this violence was happening previously, but maybe they didn't believe it so much. As you asked Kymone, he had some preternatural calm, and he said very, very, it's despicable and sad that in the life story of a Black man in America, having a gun in your face by the cops is something that you have. There's a whole segment of this country that didn't ever believe that. And I think they're seeing it now.
It's good for me too, right? Because again, before this week, I would never have thought of myself as pro-cop, right? Like, seriously, I would have never thought of myself as someone who was like unaware of the evils of the police. But it is still fundamentally different when they are literally shooting at you. And you're like, oh, whoa, fuck the police. Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, because it's, and when we, in our live stream, for those of you who watched it, like, I asked a lot of the young people, like, hey, I'm really scared right now. Are you guys scared? And a lot of them said the same shit Kymone said. We were already scared. That's why we're here. And that's terrifying. I don't want my kids to grow up in that world. I don't want my friends and my godson and my siblings to grow up in that world. Like, and that's until we have a world where the people carrying guns, but the policemen carrying guns are there to protect us and not intimidate us. We do not live in a democracy at all.
And then I think, you know, you get into, we've talked a little bit, qualified immunity, community review boards. The militarization of the police is just like literally the dumbest consequence of our ludicrous get rich by selling machines that kill people scheme in DC. We built so much hardware to kill people that we ran out of wars to spend it on. So we just started giving it to the cops. Yeah. It costs the police office, the police force $64,000 for an armored, like a big armored police carrier. What do they really need that for? They definitely don't need it. Maybe they could have one and they share it around when in times of emergency. But when you give these cops the weapons of the military, they're going to act like, and then you remove any ability to hold them accountable, obviously. And then you create a system that recruits killer cops by protecting them. Doesn't matter how good an apple is. You're going to have killer cops with armored personnel vehicles and machine guns. It's a bad, bad recipe. So let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of the federal program that gives surplus military equipment to police forces around the country. Just get rid of that. No more secret police in this country. And then I want to talk about this one if you've got opinions on it. But civil asset forfeiture is like got to be front and center here. It's like the most perverse. The police forces around this country are funded by stealing money from people without trial.
And we're allowed to do that because it's not, even though it is a sexy issue and it should be a sexy issue, it doesn't have a sexy name. Like civil asset forfeiture, what is that? Like, let's try cop-backed thievery, you know? They can take your shit if there is any suspicion whatsoever.
And I would just say it's not even, they don't even need suspicion. ProPublica had this amazing expose of it where they were looking, and it's police force by police force. But in Philadelphia, it's not, they do seize $10,000 of somebody's that they find, even if the person has a very real, reasonable explanation, like with receipts. Like, I just sold my mother's estate, and this is the profits of it, and I'm going to that bank right there. That you should read the ProPublica piece, viewers, to read some of these. But the Philly police force just stopped people and stole the money out of their pockets, right? Because they didn't have any accountability. They just, and it's black men and women, primarily black men and boys. They would just stop them and shake them down for their money. So, like, I think it's just it's like, you know, they're a gang. They're the thugs. They're operating as a criminal gang, state-sponsored criminal gang, and civil asset forfeiture should be the easiest one. No more letting the cops rob us act. Is that decent?
Oh, that was-
no more letting the cops rob us act.
I love it. And, you know, look, it is, I'm still processing, like, again, like Kymone called me out on earlier, chances are, even if you're a radical leftist, even if you are intellectually aware of this shit, until you are in the middle of it, the reality of that thuggishness may not come home, you know? And it's like, we talk a lot. I mean, you know, we live in the Me Too era. We talk a lot about rape culture and the ways that places like fraternities can breed this in like secretive male violent culture. And the police in America is no different, except they're backed by the state. And that's a terrifying thing. You know, a lot of really fantastic activists have been talking about the added dynamic of like violence against Black women that occurs by the police to no repercussions whatsoever. These people can sexually assault, they can rape, they can brutalize, they can steal, and nothing will happen to them. And Alex points out that kind of profession is going to attract the type of person who is interested in that. Like, I've been saying this to people all week, like, you don't become a cop because your second choice was English literature. You know what I mean? Like, this attracts a specific type of person and it makes them worse. It's terrifying.
So
what are we going to do?
The other thing is that police unions are not unions.
Yeah.
It's a shared insurance scheme that is broken, and the labor movement needs to clean up because it's a mess. There's no justification for protecting killer cops, and that's what the scheme is. Everyone, you know, pays their dues in, and then if somebody is prosecuted, they're gonna have the union is going to, you know, be there to help them with the legal stuff. But what that turns into is a protect the killer cops scheme. So it's got to be fundamentally changed. I am extraordinarily pro-union for collective bargaining. That's what we need to get to with police unions. But the way they're operating right now is a protect killer cops racket. I think the movement for Black Lives has on their website. And actually, Jocelyn, if you want to take over for a second, I'll get a link that we can share with people, and that has all of the demands.
Yes, that would be great. And that's, you know, that brings me to another thing. We're coming to the end of our solidarity hour, but don't listen to anything we're saying. Get involved in your Black Lives Matter, your local Black Lives Matter chapters. One thing that has been really edifying. So, you know, I've interviewed a ton of people this week and spoken to a ton of people in my building, my community. It is a good thing that people are coming to these protests. Obviously, wear your mask, hand sanitizer, get tested after and quarantine after if you can. But, you know, there was a fire drill or fire in my building or something right before the show. And I was talking to one of my neighbors, Perry, and I asked him, I was like, what do you think of all these protests? Like, and he's a Black man in his 70s, right? And he's like, this is one of the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And he lived in DC during the civil rights movement. He was like, the level of just like, there are just so many people out here from all backgrounds. And he said, I've never seen anything like it before. It's a really amazing thing. So if you're on the fence about going to these protests, like, we are doing really important work by having this many people of all kinds out in the streets in 50 states, ensuring that these killer cops get arrested. Because obviously this fight is not going to be over when the protests end. But the reason these countrywide movements happen is because they work. Everybody's paying attention to this. I don't know about you guys, but this is my social media feed right now, is entirely about police brutality and Black Lives Matter. And that's important. That's good. Sorry, Alex, did you find the link?
I did, but I want to go quickly, and because I want you to sign us off, because you have put in the work. But I want to read it, and you can go to m4bl.org. That's movement4blacklives.org, m4bl.org. But the demands you'll see are broad because it's a system that we have to take on. We demand an end to the war against Black people, and there's a bunch of other pieces in each one of these. We demand divestment from the police and investment in Black communities. We demand local schools, colleges, universities, and all public institutions cut ties with the police. We demand repair for past and continuing harms. We demand immediate relief for our communities. We demand economic justice for all our people. We demand the right of protesters be respected. We demand community control. And in each one of those, you have multiple policy points to spell out what those principles mean. So everyone should go to m4bl.org and check out the Movement for Black Lives. Jocelyn, please give us your wisdom and sign us off. I hope that we can remind ourselves that the problem is always greedy liars on Wall Street protecting their financial interests. They create a system that protects killer cops because that's what protects themselves. And we do know what the answer is to all of this. So please, thank you, everybody. But listen to Jocelyn tell us what she learned and the wisdom of the week.
You guys, I really do want to thank you for being here, and just I am so grateful for the protesters and the activists, especially the Black Lives Matter activists that have made these past couple weeks what they are, demanding justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all the many innocent Black men and women who have been murdered brutally by the police state, because what we are doing is holding up a mirror to our country and demanding that we look at ourselves and really decide who we want to be. I've seen some terrifying things at the hands of the police this week, but I've also seen just overwhelming courage from the activists who, again, a lot of these are really, really young people, like teenagers, showing just overwhelmingly transcendent courage to be out here standing up for the things they believe in. And I legitimately believe that the courage and beauty and fellowship I've witnessed this week is just so much greater than the shittiness and the fascism that we have to overcome. So thank you so much for being with us, you guys. Please get involved and stay involved, and we'll see you next Friday.